back on another episode of The Wave, the wonderful Alberni Valley experience. I'm your host, Don Texan. And at this point, I'd like to acknowledge we are coming to you live from our studio, the Rainbow Wave Production Studio here in Port Alberni, in the beautiful unceded territories of the Hoopa-Chesit and the Tushot peoples, where we live, love, and play with so much wonderful Alberni Valley experience. And of course, with me is my co-host, Carol Ann, who is, well, I'll let her do the announcement.
Is what?
You know what.
Oh,
anyway,
no.
say hello, Carol Ann.
I don't know what you want to say, Don.
Okay, fine. You'll just notice it on the
Oh, yes,
on the lower
I have a
third.
new name.
She's getting married. All right.
It's about time.
That's for another episode now. Well, today we're going to be talking about still something that is near and dear in my heart. The last episode of The Wave, we were talking about Indigenous issues, and I thought it was so well received, and it was so well placed. Thank you to Trevor and Jeff at the time, who was our guest. And so we decided to do a part 2, but this time we're going to call it Indigenous Issues, the next generation, because with our guests are descendants, so to speak, for lack of a better word, of people who did go to residential schools. And I'll let Carol Ann do the introductions.
Well, today we have Trevor Little again. Trevor, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself for those of them that didn't tune in last time?
Sure, yeah. Trevor Little, and my new channel's name's Nosleet. I like people to use that too. I'm a school teacher at Hahopaig School. I teach culture and I coach multiple sports up there. I come from the Robinson family and the Little family here in Port Alberni. My dad's Hector Little and my mom's Joyce Little. And I also do a lot of other speaking and working for children who are in care.
Well, thank you for being with us. And then we also have Kim Erickson. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, my name's Kim Erickson, and I come from Heshquit First Nation, which is just out of Tofino there if you take a boat ride. And I am a youth outreach counselor. I work for Untitled Tribal Council here in Port Alberni, and coming up 14 years working for the Tribal Council. And yeah, my traditional name is Tatusma Youthma, which means a star way up there.
Wow.
So I'm attempting to live up to my name on Dawn's show.
Yo.
Well, first of all, I noticed, I think it's your
Tattoos.
first time doing a TV appearance. And at first I had to do some little convincing. Actually, it was Kim who recommended you
That's right.
to come on the
You said
show the
that.
first time around. And I was wanting to get another guest, this time for Indigenous issues for the next generation. And we couldn't find any. I reached out to a couple of young people, but apparently they're more camera shy than I expected. So Kim said she'll step up to the plate, and I was so happy.
Thanks for stepping up.
And so before we go, I'd just like to ask him to tell us a little about what we were discussing earlier. What your line of work is, what you do, and what led you to this line of work.
Okay, so my job title is Youth Outreach Counselor. And so what that entails is instead of a youth, so I work with youth age 13 to 18 years old. And instead of having youth being dropped off to my office by their caregiver or their parent, I actually have a list, and I work closely with Rcmp and other agencies in town, and my referrals come in, and what I do is I make that connection with the youth out in the community where they're at, their home, their school, wherever they are, gyro center, wherever they hang out. I go out and I make myself known, and I let them know who I am and what I can do. And really just meeting them where they're at. A lot of high-risk youth I work with, and it's an honor to work with the youth, especially the high-risk youth. So.
And you mentioned you're at this for 14 years.
14 years,
or
yeah,
a few
next
days
week.
from now?
December 7th, 2007 was my start
Wow.
date. So
Congratulations.
coming up, yeah, it's crazy because I only look 20. So.
I was going to say. But
Yeah, you know.
It's wild.
We were all going to say it.
I know. We were all thinking it.
Okay, since I asked Kim to tell us a little bit of what she does, I would like to ask Trevor, because you teach in a school.
That's right.
Like a private school. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Definitely. I was actually fortunate to teach in this school because I went to the school.
Oh, really?
And when I went to the school, there was my mother was a chair of the board there. Her mother was the primary teacher, what I teach right now, the primary cultural department. And my dad's mother was teaching the intermediates, the older students. So I went through being taught by my both grandmothers that taught at the school. So it feels really perfect that I'm teaching that, right? And so what I do there is I teach song, dance, and history a lot.
Oh, okay.
History is really important to me because I want our people to understand. I want the children to believe in one another and believe in their upbringing and understand where we came from. When they understand where we came from, there's less judgments on how we are raised. There's
So
more
when you say
understanding.
history, though, do you mean Canadian history, world history, or Indigenous history? Or all together?
I believe the Indigenous history I'm talking about has a lot to do with Canada, yeah, definitely. And it can seep out into that world as well, right? Because there was a lot that snowballed into where we are today, right? So just allowing, and you know what, never mind pointing a finger, because I just feel like the momentum of the world change and the world shifts. I mean, it wasn't a color or a nationality coming against another. Again, I think I said last time, they saw wealth and they wanted it, you know? And I feel like whoever was coming upon that wealth would probably have had the same conflict.
Yeah, but there's also the issue of not just getting the wealth, but also the control.
Right, well, the
of
only
the
way you
people.
can get it is through the suppression and the control. That's the only way you can obtain.
Okay, so let's dive into our topic. So right now, just to put the context of our discussion in a more clear frame, we are talking to Kim and Trevor.
Jeff's gone.
Jeff's gone.
Jeff's at home tonight.
Because they, per se, did not go to residential schools, but they are descendants of people who did. So in your case, Kim, who in your family went to the residential school?
So I am actually second generation that hasn't attended residential school. So my mother did not attend, my father did not attend, but on my mother's side, both of my grandparents did, and my mom is youngest sibling of 8, and she is the only one of her sibling group to not attend residential school or day school. Yeah, so.
So how did that impact you when you found out about the residential school issue and in relation to your grandparents?
I didn't really grow up knowing my culture. I always felt when I did partake in cultural traditions or dances, when we were invited to attend dance practice, I always felt, like I was trying to play a part. Like I felt like I was faking who I was as a First Nations person. And I remember growing up being very ashamed of my brown skin, of my name, of things.
Why do you think that was, though?
I have no idea. Well, I know why now, thanks to therapy.
Okay.
Jokingly, but serious. A shame around being First Nations. And I remember asking, like, why is my skin darker than my sister's? Why do I have the darkest skin? Because even that I felt set me apart from them. And yeah, there's a lot. It's a big question.
Yeah,
it's a big
I know.
question.
But I'm just curious to know because you are First Nations. You are not part of the other group.
Yeah.
We'll call it that. So how did you deal with that? I'm just curious to know how you dealt with it. And then you found out about your culture and what happened to your grandparents. How did that impact you growing up?
I never knew that my grandparents went to residential school, and I hadn't done a lot of my own homework. I kind of put my head in the sand, and ignorance is the only true answer. And it wasn't until I started working for a First Nations organization that I found out what residential school was. I found out that both of my grandparents attended. I found out that, all of my mom's siblings attended. And more I learned about it, and I was also a part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. I was part of that
great.
support group at a very young age. No idea what I was doing, but just knew that I was supporting people sharing their story and hearing those stories and sitting with survivors who've been through that. It it changed who I was, and I wanted to know more about my family and my history, because I really do believe that there needs to be a hinge, a change. Like, we need to take our trauma head on and do our work, because our kids deserve better and our grandparents deserve better. And we owe it to them to do better. So
You've clearly embraced your culture now.
Yes.
So how long did that take? Like, you were out of school? Like, what made you just all of a sudden embrace it?
honestly, it was working for an Indigenous agency and working in the mental health field. And we're very, like, the program I work for, Kuasa, which is Tichuk and Kuasa, it's a mental health program, but it also has that cultural aspect to it. So our office, we have a cultural team that is there to support people with traditional, healing and traditional medicine. We do referrals to treatment centers. We have counselors on site. We have youth outreach on site. We have harm reduction. We have a plethora of people and we also have residential health support workers who actually sit with survivors and help them fill out their paperwork to make their day school application, their residential school application. So that was really, immersing in that is what really taught me a lot about where I come from and who I am as a First Nations person. And now I could say, like, I'm so proud to be First Nations. And if I didn't work for a First Nations organization, I'd still be back there. I'd still be back there not knowing who I am, not being ashamed of who I am. I didn't even realize I was ashamed until, like, what's your name? And I'm like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know my name. But then I wanted to know, and I wanted to be proud. And now it's on my door at work, my traditional name. Like, I'm embracing it, and I'm proud to be First Nations, and I'm proud to be here and to be standing here, sitting here. But
well, again, I really appreciate your time to come and talk with us about this. Now let's go to Trevor. You're a school teacher, coach in sports and stuff like that, but you didn't go to residential school. Who did in your family go to residential school?
You go back 2 generations, Don, and it was my grandparents who went.
Okay, so just like Kim.
I was so fortunate, though, that my mother was able to talk about upbringing. And my mother was able to talk about upbringing, and at the same time she was working this angle to lift the shame and my feelings towards my grandparents.
Oh.
Because if she tells me about her upbringing now, as a child, I have feelings against my grandparents because I hear of what happened. And it was my courageous mom who told me a little bit about Grandma's history as well, stories she heard while she was growing up. And I won't share those here, but I'll tell you what, the horrific stories that were shared. And my mother was explaining this to me at a time when maybe she just had a moment of rage or being upset. And she had something inside her that said, and looked at her child and said, gee, I want to explain something that never got explained to me. Something she had to work out without going to learning history, without learning all these different facets there are to about healing. The generation before us had to try to do this without all that. In fact, I remind here on the last episode, it was 2002, I believe, or 3, that I went to residential school a workshop, a healing workshop.
Oh.
And I spoke about my upbringing and our history in residential schools. And I told the elders, I need to know your story because it helps me know my story and accept my story of hurt and pain. And at the coffee break, I got cornered by the leaders, and they told me, you're not to talk about that ever again here at this meeting. It's like, you won't talk like that again. You're not standing up. And I'm just letting you know, because we weren't ready for that.
Do you think everybody's more ready now, though, that it's all kind of coming out in the open?
Because there's been work, whether we want to recognize it as work in the 70s, in the 60s, all the way 80s, 90s, there's been work, but it's the work that we were capable of in the moment.
At the time.
And can you imagine now, when people want to learn our history and Orange Shirt Day and this and that, we're creating together in this world a better platform for stories to be told now. As before, even with our own families, Dawn, I'll tell you, Carol Ann, that
You don't want to talk
telling
about it.
man, I'll tell you what, I was 6 years old and I was like, man, I got something I want to say. Like, this is happening and this is happening to me. And silence.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the last episode.
Right.
There's the shame, there's the silence, and of course there's also the anger. So how do you deal with that? Those now you think it's better
you do
now?
it exactly
Is it
the
getting
way,
better now?
Exactly what Kim did. You know what? You live your life. We had resentment. I didn't want to be First Nation at all. I related to you there, Kim, because I couldn't understand the shame. I think every human being's the same. If you carry shame, that you need to understand where it come from in order to work with that. And so when the truth started coming out for us, I started being able to look, well, gee, if we trickle that back, gee, that's where these behaviors come from. Now, that's where the hurts are coming from. Boy, now I can feel that softness of a grandparent's love again. The softness of a grandparent's love. I mean, that, I believe that gave us the fuel to make it through every generation, Don. Was the softness of grandparents' love. I believe there'll be everybody in our community, there's not a single person who will say, Grandma and Grandpa were so soft. And that was so necessary for us. Because Mom and Dad were learning how to be parents through a hard upbringing. And we all know as we get older, you know, we learn more things and we become softer. And I believe that helped us through. So grandparents, you know, they were a savior to our community.
Well, Kim, you mentioned that you were part of the committee or something. Could you tell us a little about that?
That's huge.
So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada was I guess like a movement that started after the findings of residential schools happened. And so there was, what were they?
Could we put a timeline on this? Like, what year was this?
It's when I first started, so 2007, 2008, for maybe from 2007 to 2010, maybe. That was about the time that I was part of it, and then I moved positions after that. But I didn't realize at the time, given my age, given my my upbringing, I had no idea that, you know, I always heard, you know, you hear about residential school and you hear about the things that happen, but when you see people that you know from your nation, Trevor, sitting there and sharing their story about what happened to them, and I remember sitting there sometimes and just thinking, like, holy smokes, like how are you still here? How are you still a functioning person?
Wow, really?
And just,
that deep, huh?
It was really,
Really?
I think it was just a lot. It was a lot, and I had no idea. And now I see these elders in the community, and I just have so much respect for them because, you know, life is hard, but I can't imagine what it was like with them and their story and the things that they've had to endure so that we could be here, and, you know, that's where I say, like, we owe it to them to be proud of who we are, because they gave their lives. They fought for their lives so we could be here.
You're so right.
So that was pretty powerful. Definitely eye-opening. Yeah.
Do you guys feel like as the generations are going on, and now you guys have children that you're raising, that things are getting better? Like, are you able to teach your kids about it all and feel comfortable teaching them and making them proud of where they are from?
This is what I was going to really want to say about real teachings now. We're ready for them.
Yeah.
For instance, they were trickling into our souls, spirits, and families throughout these years of little bits of healing. And I shouldn't say little bits because they were huge in every generation. The 80s had big movements, meetings, and different healings happening and gatherings. But I think we're ready now, because of all that work, for real honesty and real change. Like, I mean, in a way that we can now speak about our immediate family's hurts. Because I'll tell you what, Kim, the stories we've heard usually come from somebody who's not our family. Jeff said it on the episode earlier, he didn't speak to his family. It's easier for him to speak to others. But now we're ready for necessary healing, which is family to family. I would love for, and this will be the first time I say this, and he'll watch this, I'm sure. I'd love for me and my brother to have an honest talk about our upbringing. Shed tears. Realize that it wasn't ours, you know? And those honest talks we need to get ready for. Mom and Dad, you know?
Yeah.
How to, you know, it's okay, the mistakes you made. I'm strong because of you. I mean, we're ready for those talks. My sister, you know, I hugged her today when I saw her. And when I hugged her, I just feel like I had so much words that I'm so sorry, you know, of our upbringing. And I wish she could learn that history too, because not everybody in our communities know that history, and they need to. It's necessary so that we can start learning how to love one another in a way that promotes, you know, that growth.
So Kim, you work with troubled youth. Do you think this has also something to do with the effects of this issue that we're talking about?
Yeah, you see the overrepresentation of Aboriginal children in the foster care system, which was another job that I did. And I, again, learned amazing things about the system and about our trauma as First Nations people. And I do see the overrepresentation of, you know, our parents, our grandparents, they didn't know how to parent. That was taken away from them. And, you know, they did the best they could, but, you know, if you don't tick these boxes, then, you know, they're going to come for your children. And that's a huge trigger for our people, because the children were taken physically, forcibly. And it was the law. It was absolute law back then. And so that's a huge issue. Many of the kids I work with are in the foster care system. And, you know, I think that the main thing, there's one thing that I could drive home to my youth, it would be that you're enough. You're enough the way you are. Because there's so much shame around, you know, your parents' mistakes or your grandparents' mistakes, and you just see the cycle repeat and repeat and repeat. But I do think we're in a place now where the world is watching. The world is watching, and it's not a secret anymore. And I hate to say it, but the Kamloops 215 has been a real eye-opener for not just Canada, but the world, to see like, okay, this isn't just an Aboriginal issue with a few people. Like, this is real. Like, this is very real, right? Like, that's a huge thing.
It's a humanitarian issue. These are human beings.
Yeah.
And the number's gaining on 8,000 now with, I think we talked about that last time. Boy.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, do you think we're doing enough? We are heading in the right direction. We agree on that, you know, we are heading in the right direction. Things are changing. The world is listening. The world is watching.
You know,
the world is being more aware of what has happened and what needs to be done.
What's asked of our community, I believe, Don, should be asked of the community outside as well. And what I mean by that is an acceptance, and a tolerance to hear stories that might be horrific to our own past due to our own upbringing. A lot of the time, people who don't want to hear it, and we got to realize sometimes they have their hurt upbringing as well, and triggers are they happen, right?
Yeah.
You know, but I believe that the outside community needs to just almost follow suit in a way, because we're at a spot where we almost are uncertain of what our next move is due to being overwhelmed, due to being wondering, you know, just what's the state of my family? Boy, because once this came out, the number 215 and those things, and more eyes came on us, more ears opened up. Well, now, not only are you guys, but we're looking at our families a little more honest as well. Because when you can't accept, you don't want to look honestly. But now that other people are accepting and people are healing in our community, now there's a little more acceptance. And when you can do that, I believe, you know, that true healing starts happening.
You were saying something earlier, I don't remember who you said it, but about it being too almost commercialized now, though, the Orange Shirt Day. Tell me a little bit about that, because I was interested when you were talking about that earlier. Right.
And it was just something I was learning, Carol, and it was nothing that I really own, but I want to learn more about the commercialization. I have an aunt who said along the lines of keeping it, sorry auntie, and I wish I remembered your exact words, but she wanted to keep it what it started off as.
You keep it more meaningful or sacred in some way.
That's
to a
right,
degree,
less
right?
commercialized and less, because when they bring it to a national day like that, it's almost taking away the authenticity and what it started off being. And what it started off being is really great work, really great, you know? But we got to be careful how we celebrate it, or if we do, or you know what, I don't. But,
Well, I ran into a little bit of an issue. Like, say, it's not celebrate per se. It's like maybe acknowledge or
Honor, maybe.
Honoring.
Yeah,
There you
there's a
go.
better
Thank
word
you.
for it.
honoring.
When it comes to the National Day that we just declared as September 30th, but it was the same thing as Orange Shirt Day was September 30th. So they just put the two together? Was that the story behind that?
So the story behind Orange Shirt Day, and I
Okay.
only know this because I was gifted the Orange Shirt Day book.
Yeah, I
by,
borrowed it from you. I remember that.
Yes, and by Phyllis Webstad. Webstead, I don't know how to say her name, but and in that book it explains the meaning behind Orange Shirt or Orange Shirt Day, and it was Phyllis Webstad being taken from her home
Yes.
and showing up to her school, her new residential school, in her orange shirt, and she was stripped of that shirt and told and just totally shamed from that day forward. So that was, and September 30th was when, by that time they had collected all of the kids, so it was the start of the school year, like that was the cutoff.
Oh, that's why it's
thank
December
you
30th.
for
Yeah, because by that time, that's when school was starting, and they had all the children that they needed and wanted, and it's a fantastic book, and I do have it if anybody wants to borrow it.
Well, I borrowed it one time.
Yes.
I used it as my reference last time. And
You just give your cell number and
Yeah.
the people will borrow it.
Yeah, my
is it
cell
available
number
on
is.
Amazon?
Well, and the bookstore on Argyle
have-
is great. If they don't have it, they would get
They'll
it in.
order.
Absolutely.
Right.
Like they're
Right.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how the Orange Shirt Day, and I think the government piggybacked on that because they saw the popularity of it. But for me, I make sure that, like, my family, they're non-First Nations, they're Mamatli, and it's very important to me that my children know the importance behind Orange Shirt Day, and they do. And they showed up and they did the walk from the Harbour
Harbour
Quay
up
to Shot, and they spent the day with me, and it meant so much to me.
oh, that's
it was,
beautiful.
and I think that's the piece. It's not a day off. For me, it's not just a statutory holiday. It's not just a day to reflect, and it's a day to be active and to be proud and to show people like our culture, because our culture is so beautiful, and that's
It is.
something that I grew up like almost shy and ashamed of. Being ashamed of being First Nations, being ashamed of who I was and where I came from, and looking back on it now, I cringe at the thought of my grandparents hearing me say that. But I try every day to be a proud First Nations person.
Way to go,
Yeah.
And when you were talking about what this day meant, I remember you said something about Christmas. Can you go back in time now and imagine what the first celebration in Christmas looked like? And the second? And the third? Authenticity,
goes
family
away.
gathering. Now we're this many years later and it's barely about that. It's how much money are you spending on me and how much am I allowed to spend, Mom and Dad? And so
Nobody's
that's
happier than Amazon on Christmas.
You're right, but that's where we don't want, in a sense,
Exactly.
this holiday, this day of honoring to go. We don't want it to grow so big. Just keep it grassroots, kind of,
Keep it real,
Real.
authentic,
There you
and
go.
sacred.
and honor.
I think-
and honor.
The more that there are like the walks and if those kind of things stay consistent every year, I don't know what they had other than what they had in Port Alberni, but those things are important. As long as it just doesn't become, okay, I have to send my kid to school in an orange shirt, like
Yeah,
Pink Shirt Day
right.
has kind of become. I feel like we have to every year almost do something new, but to show everybody what it really is, and not
Stick
just
to that root.
let it be just Orange Shirt Day. You
Right.
know, like
Yeah.
I
Keep
just
the
don't
root
want it
there.
getting swept under the rug as just that day that everybody wears an orange shirt.
Right.
Yeah, it needs to.
And it's almost, becomes like that because people truly, I believe, get tired of hearing the sad, the story. You know, I mean that it'll become commercialized because of that. And this is a way of them serving the community in the public's eyes still, but really not. It's not really serving anybody if we let it commercialize too much. You know.
Yeah. I just feel like there always needs to be something. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, not like I said, not just okay, we're going to send our kids to school in their
Yeah.
shirts. We need to have something where there's awareness around it, and that needs to keep up. Otherwise, it's just, you know.
And I just want to jump in and just say that that piece is like, if you're sitting at home and, you know, just enjoying your paid day off, you're not taking the bull by the horns, and you're not gaining that knowledge. So like, ignorance is taught, right? And
There you go.
to educate yourself and to understand where people come from, like, you got to get out and you got to learn and you got to read and you got to try understand, because Orange Shirt Day isn't just a one-day thing with a cotton
Yeah.
red orange shirt, right? It's a lived experience for an entire people's.
Right.
And it's not just one day that, oh, I wore my orange shirt, my
Yeah,
kid
that's
wore
what
their
I just
shirt,
don't
Yeah,
want to see.
exactly.
right? That, like, that's a lived history that we're all struggling to work through. And yeah.
Well, it just so happens, like, even I just learned recently about Orange Shirt Day, and I wasn't really aware. I mean, there is that stigma that's surrounding, like, First Nations people that I think we can address at this point. Like, even like you were saying, there's the overrepresentation of Indigenous children or Indigenous youth in the foster care system, and even in the homeless situation and other problems that we face in the community. So what do we need to do? Like you mentioned a while ago, Trevor, that there has to be this degree of resiliency for people to, because it's change is inevitable.
Yeah.
So how do you think we should get there, or what step do we need to take
I
to?
really believe the degree of resilience will keep building up and up as long as we're willing to accept people's truth. Accept it, hear
Accept
them,
people's truth. That's
and
a very
hear
nice
them.
statement. Yeah.
and hear them, right? Because anybody who's dealt with pain before knows that you need to be heard in order to heal. Anybody, in any walk of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if we keep building on the work that's there for us already, and we have to acknowledge that there's been work for not hundreds of years, but what are we? Since 50s,
150.
60s.
Canada's 150 years old, isn't it? Or no, more than now.
More than that now. But,
Right.
Yeah.
And I really think our route for everyone to be able to be a part of this is acknowledging that we're all First Nations somewhere. Mm-hmm. Acknowledging that we all belong here on Earth. And if we can do that, geez, where's the best place to live, guys? It's here, right? It is. It's a beautiful country.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can all acknowledge that we belonged here, I think we can start working together a little more and accept each other's histories. Because we have to accept each other's histories. There's horrific histories wherever you go.
Yeah, and just move on to healing and reconciliation.
Right. And even the people,
peace.
like, let's say I point my finger at a race, at a what do you call it, religious belief. Let's say I point my finger just at them, right? We have healing because of them, but you know what? Who I'm pointing my finger has healing to do too.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever I'm pointing my finger at has healing to do that's necessary, right? And so that's why I say the acceptance of where we come from is so important. So important. I think if we have that common ground to stand on, we're more acceptance to other races.
Okay, the next point I want to discuss is, you mentioned you have the school. How is your school different from the regular school? Because it's a private school in a reserve.
Definitely.
Right.
I believe culture and spirituality make it thrive.
Okay.
Right? And I can never take away from the late Adam Shuish, our last chief of Sishat, who watched children and the people, the counselors in the community, and the leader, Adam Shuish, believed that these children were getting kicked out of school after the funding came in.
Oh.
So the funding comes in X date, we'll look for any reason to kick you out. And that's what our people believed. In fact, I used to say it because I heard it in my family. I'd say it in ADSS, I'll get kicked out after October because they're going to wait for funding. Because that's what I heard growing up. Didn't know what it meant. So yeah, you know,
This is a touchy subject. We shouldn't.
well, it is a touchy subject, but, you know, and
Well, let's just discuss what you do in that school. So how many students are in the school right now?
there's over 140 students with a waiting list right now.
Wow.
Yeah,
And it's not just for Indigenous children. I mean, anybody can
it's
go
a
to
public school
It's a
open to
public school.
anybody. Or sorry, it's not a public school, a private school open to anybody.
I see.
Right, right. And I guess spirituality and culture really nurse things that you can't approach in other schools.
Okay.
You can't talk about every topic, right? And I think culture and spirituality nurse something inside us that we don't even realize. For instance, let's put on a good song, a soft song. It can be Nuchanos on a drum, it can be on the radio. It does something to us, you know? You're crabby when you're cleaning up, you put on the right music, you're just cleaning up with the strut now. And I think the culture and the spirituality stir these young spirits to maybe let go of that, maybe a confusion or pain or an anger, I don't know, you know, but it allows them to come from somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
I see a lot of pride in your students, pride in who they are as First Nations people, and the teachings, right, that
Right.
you guys give every day.
Right.
Because we are an oral people.
You know what? And I thank you for touching that, because sometimes I'm getting here and there, but what really helps our school is the fact that we have teachers there now who are willing to learn the language and our history.
Wow.
That's huge. Because before it was just another job in order to get to the district for some of the teachers, not all. We had some great teachers throughout the history of Howapeg. But now more we're having people who hear our history and who can speak language a little bit, at times better than perhaps my mom and dad. Right?
How
Who
about
are
you? Do
First
you
Nations.
speak any part of the language, or you speak the language?
Yeah, I can
fluently?
speak classroom language. I can't speak fluently. I can read whatever you put in front of me and then say a few greetings.
Okay. How about you, Kim? Do you speak the language?
I just know the bad words, and some of the, you know, I know the simple words. Like the kids at the school would put me to shame, but I know very little, but I do embrace what I know. And there's also a language program here at the college
Right.
too that is open to everybody. And there are constables that are taking the language and learning our
Really?
language. So
Constable
that's
Sorry.
Constable O'Connor, actually. Beth.
Do you know of any constables here in Port Alberni who are First Nations? Because I understand you applied to become an RCMP, but we're not going to talk about that.
We're not
But,
gonna talk
I mean,
about that.
It got me curious, like how many Indigenous people are accepted into the RCMP?
If I'm being totally honest, the Aboriginal people I've spoken to who have applied, we've been dismissed for very minor things. When you see somebody else who's applied that has white skin and that privilege, and they're a shoo-in. They're a shoo-in because their dad was a police officer, or you know, they're third generation RCMP. But folks like myself have been rejected and told to reapply in 3 years. And for me, it's like, if I'm applying the third time and I'm rejected, it's not for me. Like, that's what I believe. I believe that it's not for me. As much as I believe in my heart that I think I'd be great, it's not for me. Like, that's not the path that.
Well, maybe in upcoming episodes we'll talk to the RCMP people, how they stand about this issue.
Yeah.
But in the end,
Boy.
I think you are in the position that you're called for. Like, when you told me what you do, I mean,
Sure.
that's rewarding,
Sure.
and clearly you love it.
So necessary.
So, yeah,
When I think
you got
about
to the right place.
Yeah, when I think about the path that I'm on, and I never even wanted to go to university. Like, I'd never planned on getting my education. I wanted to get a trade. I wanted to get into RCMP. I looked into the Army. You know, I wasn't an educational person, and the only reason that I got into university was an athletic scholarship for softball. And that kind of led me to this. And I was going to be a teacher, so then I was like, I'm going to be a teacher, but I'm not a teacher. I'm not teacher material. You guys are a
I guess
special
Trevor
breed.
is.
You guys are. Lesson plans, man, those are not my, anybody who knows me knows I'm not a paperwork person. I'm a heart person. I'm a, you know.
Well, I got a bunch of colleagues probably watching home saying, you would have made it because Trevor's doing okay.
Trevor's doing it. But
I'm curious, how did you two meet anyway? Because the first person she recommended to me was Trevor. So
You told me second.
No.
No, I'm just kidding, sorry.
You told me number 2.
Yeah.
Number 2 was somebody else. But anyway, we're not going to get into that because I reached out to him and he didn't even bother to reply.
Oh,
but that's
no.
okay. And next.
Yeah. I replied right away, Dawn.
Oh, yeah. That's why I was so happy. And Kim was very quick to reply as well.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you,
curious to
Kim.
know, like, so your 3rd generation, so your children will be 4th generation? Or your 2nd generation or what?
Second.
So you're 2nd, so your children will be...
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, how are you doing your parenting now with all this in life, the context of your parenting?
My first 2 parenting was my 2 sons, who are 20 and 19 now. I've had many talks with them about my mistakes and going through them. And in fact, I've told them how lucky their sisters are to have them in front of them because they went through the mistakes first. And I think I was telling you guys, I walked onto a cute table conversation of my oldest son, 20, my daughters who are 11 and 10. And he was just telling them how lucky, you know, they were that dad's softer and dad does a lot, you know, different upbringing. And I had to stop and talk to him, and the gist of what I said was, well, they have you to thank, you know, because we went through all our trial and error with you, son. And, you know, you still came out very strong, but they have you to thank for this softness, you know, like, so it was a neat conversation to walk up to, because you don't realize how your children interpret their upbringings, right?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm curious to know, like you were saying you went to walk with your children, like how do you frame or contextualize your conversation with your children?
I think for me, it's a very near and dear thing to my heart. You know, the Truth and Reconciliation and the Orange Shirt Day. I do believe it's our duty. It's our duty to educate our children. Like, if we don't do it, the world will. And we want I want my kids to have accurate knowledge, to put a face to that trauma, put a face to that name, and know that even though all these horrific things happen, like, we're still here. We're still here, and
we endured.
We endured, and we're going to be better, and we're going to be better. And I can't remember what they said. It takes 7 generations. I think is what they say. So
that's what they've said, yeah.
And that's if we do all our work and we do all of our hard work.
Yeah.
Of course, there's going to be setbacks. Of course, it's easy to see, you know, 1 or 2 or a handful of people and assume that nobody's making any progress. But this is progress, right?
It is.
For it to be recognized as a national day is progress. It's progress for us, and it's a real time of healing.
And like you said, it's not just Canada, it's not just Port Alberni, it's the world becoming aware.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we're still waiting for the apology from you know who. But anyway, we're going to talk about you. We're almost out of time, but I will not let this episode end without, because last time Trevor came here with a feather. Now he came here with a stick. So I want you to talk about and tell me about that thing you're holding.
For sure, and I told Dawn I was going to bring my talking stick last time, but I left it in my classroom it's for important talks.
Okay.
And when I'm speaking to my children, when I bring this out, they're like, oh, he's going to have something important to say here, right?
Oh, I see.
And it was my grandmother who saw a strength in me in public speaking. And she had a grandfather who used to come into the hall, and he was blind, and he had a talking stick. But he would always announce himself in a really comical way and well presented in the potlatch or in the gathering. I guess she saw that in me as I was growing anyway. And so she honored that and said, you know what, son, anytime you speak, I want you to, if it's important to you, I want you to use this talking stick. This was hers, made by her, her son.
So what kind of wood is that?
Red cedar, homies. In fact...
And it was carved by an artist here?
The late Wilfred Robinson was my uncle, my mom's brother. And it was his mom he was making it for.
Oh.
But his mom was in a spot where she wasn't willing to accept the cane. right? You know, she was at this age level where she needed one, but she says, "Nah, I don't."
Oh, okay. Don't
not
get
there yet.
started on mothers who like refuse hearing aid, refuse
There you go.
eyeglasses.
We'll know when we get there, though, Don. We'll know how they felt once we get there. You know.
Well, I'm already coming up with a list of like 2 words that old people don't want to hear is like bifocals, hearing aids, assisted living.
Oh man, no assisted living.
You're
Yeah.
almost
Senior
there,
home.
Dawn, so be careful. Just
You know-
Sorry?
You're almost there. Be
You
careful.
know-
Yeah, I know. I have to be kind.
When you talk about that assisted living and senior homes and things, I really have pride for our families who, perhaps maybe it wasn't so accessible. Why we keep grandmas in the house and grandpas in the house, like my wife's
I
grandma.
never have my like.
I
my,
love
I have my
that.
mom
Yeah,
here.
my wife's grandma lived with us until I believe she was 90, 91, 92. But yeah, she had about 7 or 8 years with us, and
Oh, that's wonderful.
there was nothing more special for my children to see us taking care of their grandmother.
Was it traditional for the First Nations people to care for their elders? I think it was.
Very
wasn't it?
traditional. In
Right.
fact, the longhouse was a beautiful style. I was just telling my students today, boy, when we lived in the longhouse, our families really honored each other. Why? Because auntie and uncle lived in the same home as you. Grandma and grandpa lived in the same home as you. So when it was time to teach and talk, you had so many teachers there that took the time to care for you. In fact, I said, now in today's homes, we're lucky to have one parent there. Or then I have to
Yeah.
identify, or non-blooded people who are taking care of you. I said, so can you imagine how lucky we were in the longhouse
Yeah.
when our families were, I think it's ingrained in us to stick together. And that's
It's a beautiful thing too.
yeah.
Well,
And
like
that's in
this-
many other cultures as well.
Because Kim, you mentioned that when you learn about all these traditions and your culture and your history, there's so much beauty in it. There's so much meaning and there's so much knowledge in it. So could you share some of the rituals that they tried to eradicate? The very reason for the residential school was to erase everything, like the language, the culture, the history, the
Well,
traditions. Fortunately, they didn't succeed.
The famous quote is, and we're going to kill the Indian and the child. Right? It's quoted, it was written down.
Yes. When I was doing my research, right? So they tried to erase, and they, to some extent, were successful in erasing so many things. But now they're coming back. And like you said, you're not there yet with the singing, and you're not singing as loudly and as clearly and as...
Although we're
That's the way it
doing
used to
really
be.
great, but yeah, we cannot compare to pre-contact people's spirituality.
Yeah, so to lighten the mood a little bit about the discussion, like, tell us about the different things that you have in your culture and your history, like the potlatch or the singing and...
Potlatch, aka revival.
Okay.
Right.
So tell us about
1951.
what potlatch is all about.
So potlatch, do you want to touch on potlatch?
Sure,
Yeah?
sure.
Okay.
Well, I can't tell you exactly what it's about because we're still building on it now, right? But it was definitely a gathering of our leaders, our
Okay.
historians, families at all levels, grandparents and parents. And the beautiful thing about it is children knew how to sit still back then, right? Right? And so they were
There
learning.
wasn't too much sugar then in their diet.
No, well, yeah, you're right. But they were learning and listening to these great orators and historians and singers and speakers, and our royalty, the leaders were all there.
Wow.
And what a powerful thing to be a part of numerous times of the year. When the winter came was our time to sit. And it was our time to potlatch and invite people and travel to other people's communities just to get to know our connections and our wealth. And the one thing I truly love about a chief's wealth was he wasn't considered wealthy unless his people were living really well.
Wow.
There was no wealth. It didn't matter how much he obtained, but his wealth was measured on how his people were fed and how they were treated, and guests, right? That was the thing of a chief's wealth. Then the potlatch band came, and I remember I watched the episode last time. I was not clear on those dates. I was
yeah.
rambling. 1884 till 1951, right?
That was a potlatch.
That was
band.
how long? 71 years, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Is that the right math?
We'll add it up later.
Yeah, I did this last time. But anyways, it was so long, and I said now we're from 1951 to 2020, which is 60 some odd years, and like I said, we still have way more work to do. Yeah.
But at least we're going there, right?
Yeah.
So are there potlatches now being done?
Well,
Yeah,
we have
oh.
COVID. It's probably a little
Yeah,
hard.
you're
but,
right
know,
there.
I mean, it's just like they're
No.
allowed small gathering. Like churches are
Huge.
allowed to meet like 50% capacity.
Not during the COVID, but pre-COVID, lots of potlatches.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And potlatches are a celebration. They're a ceremony. It's a
So when
so
were the
much to it.
potlatches allowed again, in 2000 or no? You said
1951.
1951.
And then all of a sudden you can imagine of the suppression and the outlaws. Who wants the potlatch when it's finally lifted? I mean, you got to have courage. You got to have, you
it's
got.
scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go, right?
They've
There's
just been through
trauma.
the trauma.
That's
and then,
right.
Like, should we do the potlatch
You know,
still?
there's a man by the name of Dr. George Clutisi you should read up on and learn about. He's from the Shot community. And he was a pioneer in getting children to learn and people to learn this culture. In fact, he wrote a play called It's a Happy Singing People. He wrote numerous of books. And he taught my mother and the children in the family, my aunties and my uncle, and they would bring the elders together and they would teach them how to sing and dance. Right? But and George Clutisi, in his time, was quite the pioneer to do this in a time when people were making fun of those people in our community. My mother said, my auntie said, when they went to the bus and it was only First Nations going to the bus, the kids would dance around them because of they were learning by this man and go ooh, and pick on them.
Oh, wow.
And it's funny because sometimes my aunt will say these same people now are learning culture and healing as well. And she has a hard time, and they have a hard time erasing that image from their trauma, going to the bus stop and being harassed a
Being
little.
mocked.
And,
sure.
and I think what's necessary to learn about that is, gee, they were all in pain, like. And that translates differently, spirit to spirit, right? Pain.
It's easier to hurt than to not.
heal.
Yeah, that's
very.
true.
I mean,
Yeah, you're right.
Hurting somebody is easy. Like,
Yeah.
you know, being there is not. Yeah.
That's so true.
moving forward, like we really need to take back our power and our pride and really just be proud of who we are, because our grandparents fought so hard. They sacrificed their lives, and a lot of people didn't make it. And
Yeah.
I just think like we're so lucky to be here that we owe it to them to honor them.
Definitely.
Yes,
And
definitely.
So language is huge, because there's so many different dialects
You
in
know,
Rcmp.
I think one of the biggest things that can help each side of this healing is this connection to our land, because that's what we're learning about a lot now too. How do we take care of this land? Because we took care of it so well due to laws and practices in our past. Not because there was too much Mother Earth for us to take away, no. Not because there was so much fish that we couldn't overfish, we could have, right? We had systems in place that complemented the life of Mother Earth, right? There was an understanding and a connection there that I think we all need to go back to at some time. That this is what gives us life. There's a connection there that's bigger than what's explained in the dictionary or what's explained in our classes. There's a connection in life there that needs to be honored. And it's hard to do it without practicing it every day. It's hard to make that connection without practicing it every day with a ritual of some kind. Other cultures will have different kind of rituals that connect them to Earth. But I think it's so necessary for us to connect, because we're so disconnected from what gives us human beings life.
That's true.
We're so disconnected.
Well,
from
we become, like to borrow your word, we become too commercialized
Right.
and plugged into our gadgets.
Right. Well, you can imagine when this over shopping with the COVID stuff and then people over shopping, man, there's a lot of people, my staff, from going, man, I can only buy this and I can only buy that. We're so dependent on that store. Meanwhile, the man who lives across the road walking off with a rifle and coming back with a deer that night is feeding his family without, too much worry. But there's a connection there that's necessary.
Yes, Kim.
There are things too, like I have to speak to this, is our traditions of the morning cleanse. In our language it's Rcmp. And there are people now, like my younger sister, who we didn't grow up knowing our culture. She has been going for a morning bath at the river every single morning, winter, summer, it doesn't matter. She goes every single day
Wow, that's
for over
awesome.
2 years, and I'm a very
Carrie?
fair weather. It's actually cold in here. I'm a
Freezing.
very
I'm
fair
glad
weather
you said
Hi,
that.
Carrie.
Yes.
Yeah, Carrie.
Cool.
The heater cranked up
And
already.
she's embracing it, and she loves it. She hasn't been sick in 2 years, and it's
Yeah.
that connection to earth. It's that refreshing.
Yeah.
It's the letting go. It's a real spiritual thing for her. And there are times, once or twice a year, I join her.
Yeah.
And I'm in and I'm out, and I'm get back to the car, and she's in there, and she's soaking, and she's
Wow.
doing her stuff, right?
Praying
Like
and-
smudging, brushing, praying, chanting. These are all things that we have, but it's almost like we're shy to, not you, because you're the cultural teacher.
But no, I know where you're coming from.
Like,
mean-
and my sister, she's open about like her usam, going for my morning ritual, and she hasn't been sick in over 2 years. And I just think I think it's a psychological, I think it's a spiritual, I think it's a emotional, physical. It's a whole wheel of health for her. And for her, like that's her jam, and she loves it and she embraces it. And she's inspired other people. Like, come, join me. Like, I go every day.
Awesome.
Come. And
Wow, that's
so,
awesome.
yeah, not me though. Where's my sweater?
Well, maybe next time I'll invite
know-
your sister on our show.
There we go.
I truly believe, though, that there's a connection so deep, it's unexplainable to us, our human spirits, and the spirits that are growing on this land and walking on this land. And I want to use the example of this that I showed in elementary school class one time, that even giving good energy to a plant will help it. Even talking negatively to a plant in a closed corner will allow it does.
Yeah.
They shrivel. And there was even an ice experiment.
Word is life.
There was an ice
Spoken words is
experiment
life.
that if you had the ice water, that if you spoke really nice to this water every day, and people see, I even smile about it today because there's a stigma, and the ones that you talk with bad energy to and you say bad things, the water actually gets foggy, the ice cube.
Really?
It does. Try it out. I mean, there's energy there that we don't acknowledge today, because the only thing acknowledged really is where your education is and how much money you
Yeah.
make, and are you a good person to people? Well, we haven't been good to Mother Earth for years.
Well, yeah, that's why she struck us with COVID, maybe. Anyway, we're almost out of time. I'd like Kim to give her final message to the people who are watching out here. Then we'll go to Trevor. Then Carolina will close. So, Kim, what message would you like to put out there for our upcoming generation?
You're on the spot.
I know. Hey,
Totally.
like
We had a
action.
rehearsal too.
If I could say one thing, it would be, be proud of who you are. Honor where you come from, wherever that is, whether it be England or here or Hot Springs Cove, wherever you come from, honor that, because you have hundreds of people behind you that have given everything for you to be here. And I truly believe
Yeah.
that connection is the correction, right? We need to connect. We need to talk about this stuff. We need to have the uncomfortable conversations. We need to be able to forgive each other,
Yeah.
let it go. And not let it go in the sense of, like it's a one day, like, come on, you guys, like, get over it. But let it go, like, do your grieving, do your work, because then your best self will come forward. And we don't need to stay stuck.
Yes.
We don't. We don't. We have all the power in our court. It's just we need to take it back. And
That's beautiful, Kim. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for both of you for coming. It was really nice to see you again, Trevor, and to see you, Kim. Your stories are great. I liked seeing it from a different perspective. So thank you so much, and it was very good.
Thank you. Well, as we have said, the doors are open, eyes are open, ears are open. There's room to be heard, there's room to be seen, and there's a door you can go through to experience and go towards that healing that we all need.